So in the previous video we talked about user defined function and how we can use it, looking at function definition and function invocation, where you call the function to actually execute whatever code is being written inside the function. So here we are going to be looking at functions that take in parameters. So we have an example of a function here which says print twice. But what is it going to print twice? It's going to print this value. It's going to put it inside whatever operation that it has. But when we're talking about functions that take in parameter, we are talking about functions that in the parentheses, while dividing the function, we have some particular value that is being passed in, which will be used in calling the function to create dynamic operations, such as in our functions that we defined in the previous video when we are checking for the circumference of a circle. Here I have my circumference to be 7 initially, then I change it to 6 to output something different. But I can always do that, not always want it to come into this function here, but I can do that by passing in something here. Whenever I'm trying to call the function, then it will be using the value that being passed into this parentheses to compute for the circumference without having to come inside the function to redesign the function, because the program flow have to be designed. So to get dynamic output, I can input any parameter in my function and use that parameter to define the operation of the behavior of the function. So here I want any person who wants to get the circumference of a circle to provide what we call radius. Then the radius will be used to compute for our circumference. Here when you are calling the circumference, you have to pass in an integer value that will be used, else it will return an error. We have to pass in an integer value to be used, which will be used in this computation by saying 2 multiplied by pi then multiplied by r. This r is gotten from whatever we have here, which will be an integer value when the function is being called. So here I'm having my pi variable and I'm also having my r here, which means 2 multiplied by pi is going to return something, then multiply by r, which is the integer value radius that the person provide. Now if I want to call this function, I can say okay, I want to call this function using 5, then it will check for the circumference of a circle that the radius is 5. So here it will be returning 2 multiplied by pi that is gotten from the math module, then multiplied by r, which is putting in the function on call here 5. 2 multiplied by pi then multiplied by 5 will return the circumference of a circle whose radius is 5. To save my file, I can just come down here to call this program again by saying python math.py, which is the name of the file. Then it returns the circumference of the circle to be 31. Okay, if I want to call this program more than twice with different value without having to come into the function to redefine, then I can just call it with different value by saying 7 and here by 6 when the radius is 6. So I can check for the circumference of a circle whose radius is 5, 7 and 6. Then I rerun my program here, it will return 3 different values to me. So this function has been made to be dynamic by passing in a parameter on definition. As you can see here, it says parameter r any, because I'm not giving any constraints for the parameter to be of any data type. So the parameter that will be passed into the function will be used to process the computation, which means if 5 is passed in, then 2 multiplied by pi multiplied by 5. If 7 is passed in, the same operation that will be done, whatever value that is being passed in. So here I'm passing in 5, 7, 6, which return 3 different values to me. That is a function that takes parameter, and this on definition that we put inside parentheses is called parameter, while on invocation that is put inside parentheses is called argument. Let's go back into our notes to see some things here. It says some function we have seen require argument. For example, when you call the math.sign, you're passing something, that math.sign, then you're passing in a value that you want to get the sign of. Some function take more than one argument, such as math.power that takes 2 arguments, the number and the power that you're trying to raise that number to. So that is just how function with parameter or operates. Here I also have another function that say print twice, then I pass in a string, then that string here is going to be having what we call is going to be printed to the screen twice because of whatever is inside there. Say print whatever value the user passed in, which is Bruce, print Bruce and print Bruce again, which means is this print twice is going to be printing out whatever the value whatever value anyone pass in as argument. It will be printing it out twice to the screen, and the same thing work with integer here. So I also have math.py. It should return the pi, which is 3.14. Then this math.py, which is 3.14, passed into this print twice, will return this number twice. It will print it twice to the screen. Likewise, I can also put in expressions inside a function, like we have seen in our uh, previous video. Here the expression type, then this argument is also having another thing to work with, which is the integer. Then this integer is now passed in a value. So these are expressions which have to be computed first before this print function finally have the value to output to the screen. So that is about the behavior of parameters and argument in Python. So here I can also have what we call variable and parameters in our functions. Parameters and variable are local because they cannot be called outside the function. They belong to the function in which they are defined in. Like as we can see here, I have def and I have cat twice, which means part 1, part 2. Then cat variable is being defined in this function called cat twice. So this cat will concatenate whatever I have here, part 1, part 2. If it is a string, it will concatenate, and if it is an integer, it will add the two value that is being passed in. So if I want to pass more than one value inside the function, I have to use comma separated list in order to pass more than one value inside the function to be called. Yeah, and then I call a print twice function, which will this is a function that is called inside another function cat twice. So this print twice function was defined above, in which it will print any statement passed in twice on two different lines. So here I'm going to be printing these two values putting together twice on two different lines, and as you can see here, the function is being called. It takes two arguments, concatenates them, and prints the results twice. Here is an example. If line 1 a variable being tied in and the other one is this, then the cat function, the cat twice function, passing in this variable that is holding this value and this second variable holding the value there. If I pass it into it, will concatenate those two variables which are holding string value, concatenate them, and the print twice function will does what it does by printing out what it has concatenated twice on two different lines. So that is about variables and parameter, which are only available for the function consumption and not outside the function consumption. I can also have a simple function here, I call it cat. Then I can also say take in a parameter, let us say pr1, and also another one pr2. Then I close the parentheses followed by quotation mark, and I say okay, print this print, I say pr1 plus pr2. Then that is what this function does. I come down and I come out of the function definition by using another enter key. Then to call this, I can just say def. I can just call the function by saying cat. Then okay, saying the first one is I, then the second one will be there. So what this will do is to concatenate whatever is passed in, and oh, I use a full stop there instead of comma separated, so I can just change that to comma. Then I hit enter, I say I there. So that is the output that it will return if I am trying to concatenate. But I cannot call this pr1 outside the function. Let's try to do that. it will return an error because the interpreter tried to find PR1 which is not defined. So we'll meet in the next video.